Shalom, Israel. We are the nations of kings and priests. Of Bill Ariel, and to my right,
Brother Mahar.
Today we're going to go over a little history today. I know a lot of YouTube videos, they don't really put up history. So I'm going to do a history class today. It's called the Herodian Dynasty. The Herodian Dynasty. Because a lot when you read Herod in the New Testament during Christ, you don't understand the lineage behind it. Like they was forced to keep in our laws. So we're going to do a little history on his lineage, the Herodian Dynasty. We're going to begin with Romans 15 and 4. The book of Romans chapter 15 and verse 4.
Book of Romans, chapter 15, verse 4. For whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope.
So the Bible is written for us to learn from. Whatever was written aforetime in the Bible, that's what is for us today to learn from. So that's why today I'm going to do a little history class aforetime. Now from there, let's go to 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 1. Let's get into it. 1 Maccabees.
You said chapter...
1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 1 through 3.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 2, verse 1.
Come on.
In those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jehoiada from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. Verse 2. And he had 5 sons.
Stop. He had 5 sons. Simeon, come on.
Jonan called Cadiz. Verse 3. Simon called Thassi. Verse 4. Judas, who was called Maccabeus.
That's it. That's 1 and 3. Simon. That's what we're going to concentrate on. Simon. Because from Simon came the Herodian dynasty. From Simon. Now from there, give me 1 Maccabees chapter 13. From Simon began the Herodian dynasty. I'm sorry, the Herodian dynasty. The Maccabean dynasty. I'm talking about Herodian. My fault. My apologies. 1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 53.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 13, verse 53.
That's all I want.
And when Simon saw that John, his son, was a valiant man, he made him captain of all the hosts and dwelt in Gazara.
Read it again.
Verse 53. And when Simon saw that John, his son...
That John, his son, this is John Hyrcanus the first. This is John Hyrcanus the first. Read on.
Was a valiant man. He made him captain of all the hosts and dwelt in Gazara. Right,
because from Simon had 5 sons. Out of the 5 sons, this is John Hyrcanus the first. From Simon, John Hyrcanus the first. This was the institution of the forced conversion on the so-called Edomites or Idumeans. Now from there, the John Hyrcanus, I'm going to read my little note. John Hyrcanus, the son of Simon, was the beginning of the Hasmonean dynasty. Around 110 BC, he instituted forced conversions on all Idumeans, which was an unprecedented move for a Judean ruler. These were Levites that was ruling Judea at the time. These were Levites. They instituted the forced conversion on the Idumeans, the Greek name for Edom. All right, give me Mark chapter 6. Watch this. Mark chapter 3 and verse 6.
The book of Mark, chapter 3.
And verse 6. That's all I want.
Verse 6. And the Pharisees went forth, and straightway took counsel with the Herodians.
With who?
With the Herodians.
So it's proving that there was the Herodians, the Herodian dynasty, you know?
Against him.
Read it again.
Verse 6. And the Pharisees went forth, and straightway took counsel with the Herodians.
With the Herodians, you know?
Against him, how they might destroy him.
That's it? Now give me Matthew chapter 2, verse 1 through 8. We'll get into it now. So, yeah, John Hyrcanus the first, he had 5 sons also. From him you had John the second. All right, Matthew 2, chapter 2, verse 1 through 8.
The book of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 1. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king.
Who?
Herod the king.
This is Herod the Great. This is Herod the Great. Come on.
Behold, there came wise men from the east of Jerusalem. Verse 2.
Stop. So from Herod, Herod's father was Antipater the first. Antipater. That's, you don't read about him in the scriptures, but that was his father, Antipater. Antipater. Antipater, the Idumean. Read on. Verse 2.
Verse 2. Saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him.
Read.
Verse 3. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him.
Right, he was troubled because why? He was raised up in the laws from being forced by our forefather John Hyrcanus. That's how that's why he was troubled. He understood the prophecy of Christ coming. Read on.
Verse 4. And when he had gathered all of the chiefs, priests, and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born.
Right, so he gathered all the chief priests and the scribes together. Read on.
Verse 5. And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet. Verse 6. And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah? For out of thee shall come a governor, that shall rule my people Israel. Verse 7. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared.
Right, now we still on Herod the Great. This is still Herod the Great, the son of Antipater the first, the Idumean. Read on.
Verse 8. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also.
Right, let me read this in my quick notes real quick. It's John Hyrcanus the first, what we read in First Maccabees. John Hyrcanus the first. He had 5 sons, mainly Astrobulus, which is Judas the first. The eldest in Alexander, Janus, who he married brother wife Salomon. From her, Alexander had 2 sons, Archelaus II and John Hyrcanus II. There was a civil war between Hyrcanus II and his brother over power and leadership. So there was a civil war within the Hasmonean dynasty, meaning 2 brothers that was going at each other over rulership. And the leadership, which Roman intervention took place in favor of Hyrcanus. So Rome intervened and put Hyrcanus II in power. And then Antipater the first, the Idumean, was a powerful official under the later Hasmonean kings. So Antipater the first, he was up under Hyrcanus them. He was up under him as an official. And Antipater the Idumean was very wealthy, which most Jewish people are wealthy. Antipater the Idumean was very wealthy, which paved the way for Herod. And that's when we take over in Matthew, we read about Herod the Great, the son of Antipater the first, the Idumean. Proving that he was an Idumean, but they was forced conversion to keep our law, so what you got today, the Jewish people. All right, from there, we read Matthew chapter 2. Now give me Matthew chapter 2, verse 19 and 22. Now watch this. We read about Herod the Great. Now watch this. Chapter 2, verse 19 to 22.
The book of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 19. But when Herod was dead...
What?
But when Herod was dead...
So when Herod the Great, this is the ending of him. He died, read.
Behold, an angel of the Lord appeareth in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. Verse 20, saying, arise, and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel. For they are dead which sought the young child's life.
Read on, talking about Herod the Great, which wanted to kill the baby Christ. Come on.
Verse 21, and he arose and took the young child and his mother and came into the land of Israel. Verse 22, and when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea.
Who reigned this time?
Archelaus.
This is Herod Archelaus. Herod Archelaus. This is the son of Herod the Great. This is his son. Read.
In the room of his father Herod.
His father who?
Herod.
Herod the Great. Read.
he was afraid to go thither, notwithstanding, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee.
Right. So I'm gonna read my little note again. It says, we don't read much about Herod Archelaus because he was banned from Rome for misgovernment. So you don't read much about him. So I'm just gonna tell you what happened with him. Herod Antipas ruled. Herod had Herod he had 4 sons. Herod the Great had 4 sons, known as tetrarchy, which means quarter part. 4 sons. And Herod the Great, the last remaining of the Hasmonean dynasty, was eliminated. So Herod the Great, he killed the last remaining of the the Hasmonean dynasty. Herod killed the last one off. So that paved the way for his 4 sons, which means quarter parts. So from there, let's go to Mark chapter 6, verse 14. So we read about Herod Archelaus, which we don't read much about him in scriptures, but he was removed by the Roman government for misusing his power. So he was removed. So we're going to read Mark chapter 6, verse 14 now. So that was Herod Archelaus. Mark chapter 6, verse 14. Go ahead.
The book of Mark, chapter 6, verse 14.
Come on.
And King Herod,
And who?
King Herod heard of him, for his name was spread abroad. And he said that John the Baptist was risen from the dead, and therefore mighty works do show forth themselves in him.
Right, now this is Herod Antipas. This is Herod Antipas, the other son of Herod the Great. This is what we're reading about. He ruled Galilee and Perea. Herod Antipas ruled Galilee and Perea of Judea. He's the second son of Herod the Great. Under him, John the Baptist was beheaded under him. All right, from there, let's go to Luke 3 and 1. So what are we teaching? We're teaching the Herodian Dynasty. That's today's class. Herodian Dynasty. Give me Luke 3 and 1.
The book of Luke, chapter 3, verse 1. Now, in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea, and Herod being tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip. And his brother Philip.
So this is Philip, Herod Philip. And you got Herod the tetrarch, which is Herod Antipas. Come on.
His brother Philip, tetrarch of Iturea, and of the reign of Tetrachonitis, and Lysanias, the tetrarch of Abilene.
So Herod Philip, he ruled the Iturea and the region of Tarquinionis and Lysanias. He ruled those parts of Judea. So you had Herod Antipas, you had Herod Philip, and then you had Herod Archelaus. That's 3. All right. From there, give me Luke 3:19. Drop down to verse 19 and verse 20.
The book of Luke, chapter 3, verse 19. But Herod the tetrarch, being reproved by him for Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, and for all the evils which Herod had done.
Read that part again.
Verse 19. But Herod the tetrarch, being reproved by him for Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, and for all the evils which Herod had done.
That's it. So John the Baptist corrected him for dealing with his brother's wife. Why would he do that? Because they understood the law. They was raised up on the laws. Give me Leviticus 18. This is what John was correcting him on. Leviticus chapter 18 and verse 16. Just read that. And we're going to come right back.
The book of Leviticus, chapter 18.
Verse 16. Leviticus 18 and 16. Watch this.
16. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy brother's wife. It is thy brother's nakedness.
Read it again.
Verse 16. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy brother's wife. It is thy brother's nakedness.
Right, so that's why John was correcting him about that, because they was raised up under the laws. They was forced to under the laws under the Hasmonean dynasty. So he understood that was wrong what he was doing by dealing with his brother's wife. That's why John had to check him. Now go back to Luke 3:19 again.
The book of Luke, chapter 3, verse 19.
Come on.
But Herod the Tetrarch, being reproved by him for Herodias his brother Philip's wife,
Right, they reprove means to be corrected. Reprove means to correct, read on.
and for all the evils which Herod had done.
Come on.
Verse 20, added yet this above all, that he shut up John in prison.
Right, he put John in prison. Now from there, get me Luke chapter 8 and verse 3. Go over a couple chapters, chapter 8 and verse 3.
The book of Luke, chapter 8, verse 3.
Come on.
And Joanna, the wife of Chusa, Herod's steward,
Herod steward, come on.
and Susanna, and many others, which ministered unto him of their substance.
Right, so Herod, this is Herod Antipas still. He was still around at this time. So Herod Antipas was still around at this time. Now from there, let's go Luke 9. I want verse 7 through 9. So this is still Herod Antipas that we're reading about. So you had Herod the Great, then you had Herod Archelaus, then you had Herod Antipas, and then you had Herod Philip. Come on.
The book of Luke, chapter 9, verse 7. Now Herod the Tetrarch
This is Herod Antipas we still reading about, the Tetrarch. Read on.
heard of all that was done by him, and he was perplexed, because that it was said of some that John was risen from the dead.
Right, John who he had beheaded, read on.
Verse 8, and of some that Elias had appeared, and of others that one of the old prophets was risen again.
Come on.
Verse 9, and Herod said, John have I beheaded, but who is this of whom I hear such things?
What did Herod say?
And Herod said, John have I beheaded.
So during the time of John the Baptist, that was Herod Antipas that had John beheaded. Read.
But who is this of whom I hear such things? And he desired to see him.
Right. Now from there, give me Luke 23. So what we read about is the forced conversions of the Idumeans into keeping our laws by our forefathers, which were Levites, under the Hasmonean dynasty with John Hyrcanus II. So that's how they was able to get in power in Judea, in which Rome helped also, which intervened. So give me Luke 23, verse 7 through 12.
The book of Luke, chapter 23, verse 7. And as soon as he knew that he belonged unto Herod's jurisdiction,
See that? As soon as he knew that he had belonged unto Herod's jurisdiction, come on,
he sent him to Herod, who himself also was at Jerusalem at that time.
So what is this is going into the Christ's death now? So you had Herod Antipas. He was still the king around the time of Christ's death. Herod Antipas was. We don't.
Verse 8. And when Herod saw Jesus,
He's what?
and when Herod saw Jesus,
Again, Herod Antipas was during the time of Christ's death. He was the king. Read.
he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped to have seen some miracle done by him.
Right.
Verse 9. Then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing.
Come on.
Verse 10. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. Verse 11. And Herod with his men of war set him at naught, and mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate.
Come on.
Verse 12. And the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together.
Read it again.
And the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together. For before they were at enmity between themselves.
Right. So the history of the Herodian. So 'cause when you read the book of Matthew, you see Herod throughout the Bible, throughout the Gospels, because now I'm giving a breakdown of who is who, what time period was this person in. So you had many different Herods. You had Herod the Great. From him you had his 4 sons. Herod Archelaus, Herod Philip, Herod Antipas. But still one more we're going to read about. So from there, get me Acts chapter 4, verse 27. So we read about Herod Antipas during the time of Christ's death. He was still around at that time. Acts chapter 4 and verse 27.
The book of Acts, chapter 4, Verse 27. For of a truth, against thy holy child Jesus, whom thou hast anointed, both Herod,
But who?
both Herod,
Still talking about Herod, because we read about Herod in Luke about him being around the time of Christ's death. So we read the book of Acts, but we still reading about, this is Herod Antipas. Read that again, 4 and 27.
the book of Acts, chapter 4, verse 27.
Come on.
For of a truth, against thy holy child Jesus, whom thou hast anointed, both
Both Herod,
and Pontius Pilate, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel were gathered together.
Right, so that was Herod Antipas and Pontius Pilate during the time of Christ. Now from there, give me Acts 13 and 1. Acts 13, I want just verse 1, that's all I want.
The book of Acts, chapter 13, verse 1. Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger,
Come on.
and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul.
Brought up with who?
With Herod the Tetrarch and Saul.
So we're in Acts 13, we're still reading about Herod. This is Herod Antipas still. We're still reading about Herod Antipas. Now from there, let's go to Acts 12. Now I'm going to read another side note about Philip, because we don't read much about Philip, Herod Philip. It says, Philip being the youngest, he was the youngest son of the three brothers, but he was the most efficient. He was the most efficient. He was the husband of Herodias. Herod Philip married his niece Salome, who is the daughter of Herod Antipas and Herodias. So we don't read much about Philip or Archaeology, but I'm just reading from my notes of who he is. Now from there, give me Acts 12 verse 1. I'm going to do a lot of reading on this one.
The book of Acts, chapter 12, verse 1.
Come on.
Now about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church. Verse 2. And he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword.
Now we're reading about Herod Agrippa. This is Agrippa the first. Herod, we read in Acts 13, but it went back. So showing the Bible is not written in chronological order. So this is Herod Agrippa, the great-great-grandson of Herod the Great. Read on.
Verse 3. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread.
Come on.
Verse 4. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison, and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people.
Now from that, I ain't going to read all that. Just whenever y'all have time, read the whole Acts chapter 12 all the way down. I'm not going to read all that. We're going to just get to the point. Now from there, give me Acts 25. So this is Herod Agrippa the first. He was the great-grandson of Herod the Great. And Herod Antipas' son. So Acts 25, verse 13 to 25.
The book of Acts, chapter 25,
verse 13 to
verse
25.
13. And after certain days, King Agrippa...
King who?
King Agrippa...
This is now Agrippa. Now we read about Agrippa in Acts 12, but this is Agrippa the second now.
And Bernice...
And who?
And Bernice...
His sister.
Came unto Caesar to salute Festus. Verse 14. And when they had been there many days, Festus declared Paul's cause unto the king, saying, There is a certain man left in bonds by Felix. Verse 15. About whom, when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to have judgment against him.
Come on.
Verse 16. To whom I answered, It is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die before that which is accused. Have the accusers face to face, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him. Verse 17. Therefore, when they were come hither without any delay, on the morrow I sat on the judgment seat, and commanded the man to be brought forth. Verse 18. Against whom, when the accusers stood up, they brought none accusation of such things as I supposed.
Right, come on.
Verse 19. but had certain questions against him of their own superstition, and of one Jesus, which was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive.
Come on.
Verse 20, and because I doubted of such manner of questions, I asked him whether he would go to Jerusalem, and there be judged of these matters.
Come on.
Verse 21, but when Paul had appealed to be reserved unto the hearing of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I might send him to Caesar.
Right, now how can somebody say that the Bible is a fairy tale book, and we read about men that they actually got history books on? Augustus, Caesar. I don't understand. I guess they take certain parts of the Bible and say this is real and this is not real. That doesn't even make sense at all. Come on.
Verse 22, then Agrippa said unto Festus, I would also hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, thou shalt hear him. Verse 23, and on the morrow when Agrippa was come, and Bernice with great pomp,
pride,
and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains and principal men of the city, at Festus' commandment Paul was brought forth. Verse 24, and Festus said, King Agrippa, and all men which are here present with us, ye see this man, about whom all multitude of the Jews have dealt with me,
right,
both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. Verse 25, but when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I have determined to send him.
Right, that's it. Hold on one second. All right, go to Acts 26. Watch, I'm going to show y'all something. Watch this. Acts 26, start at verse 24. It's something I read earlier, but this is another point I want to get out of here. Acts 26 and 24. Start there.
The book of Acts, chapter 26, verse 24. And as he thus spake for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, thou art beside thyself. Much learning doth make thee mad.
Read on.
Verse 25. But he said, I am not mad, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness.
Now remember what I said earlier, that they been raised up on the laws. So these Jewish people, they understood the laws. They understood the commandments. Now watch this. Read on.
Verse 26. For the king knoweth of these things.
See that? For the king knoweth of these things. Read on.
Before whom also I speak freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him. For this thing was not done in a corner.
Right, watch this.
Verse 27.
Watch what Paul tells King Agrippa. Read.
King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets?
Read that again.
King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets?
King Agrippa, believest thou? Do you believe the prophets, King Agrippa? Read on.
I know that thou believest.
See that? I know that you believe it, because while you was raised up on the laws, your ancestors down the line was forced converts to our law. So you know, King Agrippa, Paul telling him. Read that again.
Verse 27. King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? I know that thou believest. Verse 28. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian.
Right, that's all. That's it. But as you can see, that these so-called Jews, they understood the laws. They understood. That's why Paul came at them like that. You don't understand, Agrippa. You believe it. Because why our forefathers had forced them to convert to the laws. Hope y'all understood that. So with that, I'm going to end the class. I hope it was some edification of the Herodian dynasty. With that, say shalom.
Shalom.